My name is Ava Morales, and at 28, as a captain in the United States Air Force, I believed I had learned how to manage pressure. Cyber operations, high-stakes simulations, decisions that could ripple across an entire theater. Those things had sharpened me into steel. But nothing in my training prepared me for what happened on the sunlit waterfront of Tampa Bay at what was supposed to be my engagement party. The garden was immaculate, white tents, string lights, a soft breeze rolling off the Gulf. 300 people sat before me, friends, colleagues, even a few senior officers from MacDill Air Force Base. Beyond them, cameras streamed the event live to thousands of phones and laptops across the country. It was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it became an ambush. My cousin Noah, Army Special Forces, 6'2", broad-shouldered, the kind of man who had spent his entire life believing the world bent around his presence, snatched the microphone from the MC. His movements weren't clumsy or accidental, they were rehearsed. He raised the mic, smiled that smug, infuriating smile, and declared for everyone, both in the garden and online. Before she pretends to be some hero, you should all know Ava stole credit for an operation she didn't even run. The words hit like a blast wave. Conversations froze, glasses hovered midair. The string quartet trailed into silence. Somewhere behind me, my aunt, his mother, nodded with tight-lipped approval as if this whole charade had been pre-approved. My face burned, but not with shame, it was the burn of calculation. My body did what it was trained to do, assess, log, record. My eyes flicked to the clock on the digital camera. I noted the exact time stamp. I scanned the crowd, mapping reactions like entries in an after-action report. Shock, confusion, a few smirks. Noah thought he was the center of the story. He thought humiliating me on livestream would cement his place as the golden son, the family's warrior. What he didn't know was that data never forgets and lies collapse under scrutiny. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I raised my hand, palm outward, the same signal I used to freeze a cyber response team during a breach. The DJ's hands hovered, then cut the audio. The microphone went dead. The garden held its breath. I turned slowly, deliberately, toward the 100 smartphones still streaming. My lips parted, but before I spoke, I felt a steady presence step beside me. Ethan, Lieutenant Commander Ethan Park, Navy pilot, the man I was supposed to marry in just a few months, placed one hand gently at the small of my back. He didn't yank the mic from Noah. He didn't shout. His voice, calm and edged with command authority, carried across the stunned silence. "You compromised classified systems." 4 words, simple, precise, devastating. Noah blinked, confused for the first time. His smirk faltered. My aunt's hand, still clutching her wineglass, trembled. The phrase wasn't just an insult. In military language, it was an accusation of the gravest kind, mishandling or exposing secure data. For anyone in uniform, it meant investigation, career jeopardy, disgrace. My jaw tightened as I looked at the crowd, our friends, our colleagues, my so-called family. No one moved. No one intervened. The silence wasn't empty. It was a suffocating weight, pressing down on every breath, every thought. The only sound was the gulls overhead and the faint lapping of waves against the seawall. I realized, standing there in my pale dress with blood roaring in my ears, that this wasn't just a family feud or a jealous cousin trying to upstage me. It was a battlefield. One I hadn't chosen, but one I would fight on, with the only weapons I trusted: evidence, clarity, and the truth etched into every digital log. And as I looked at Noah clutching the powerless microphone, I thought, you just triggered a war you can't possibly win. I grew up in El Paso, where the desert heat makes everything look like a mirage, especially the things you want to believe about family. In our house, the rules were simple. Boys were built for glory, girls for gratitude. My aunt said it like a joke. My mother said nothing at all. Silence was the wallpaper. I was 17 the night I learned what chosen means. Thanksgiving. The table smelled like cinnamon, yams, and triumph. I slid a thick envelope onto the placemat: Afroque acceptance, full ride. Freedom printed on university letterhead. My hands shook, but my voice held steady. I got in. Noah's eyes cut to the crest, then to me. He smiled, a small surgical thing. His elbow clipped the glass pitcher just enough to pass for clumsy. Syrup red poured across the table, drowning the letter in a sticky tide. "Oops," he said, not sorry at all. "Paperwork stains easy." My mother fetched towels. My aunt patted Noah's shoulder like he'd scored a touchdown. I waited for someone to see me, not the mess, just me. No one did. I blow-dried the letter that night in my bedroom, crisping the edges, flattening the waves. It looked like a battlefield artifact by the time I slid it into a plastic sleeve. That's when I started building a fortress inside, brick by quiet brick. If they wouldn't be my shelter, I would. Years later at officer training school, that fortress met the weather. January rain came sideways, and the Alabama mud had a way of teaching humility to anyone who thought they were special. The cotter didn't yell because I was a woman, they yelled because yelling is a blunt instrument that breaks the soft parts of you so the hard parts can form. I didn't plan on breaking. They tested what they thought would snap first: endurance, doubt, isolation. There are no princesses here, a technical sergeant barked. But he wasn't looking for tears, he was looking for the flinch. I gave him stone. The first week our radio net died mid-drill. The night was thick and wet, stars hiding like cowards. We ran on dead reckoning and stubbornness until a flight mate dropped the compass. When he picked it up, the needle spun uselessly. Heads turned toward me, the quiet girl from cyber who didn't look like she could carry the ruck she was carrying. "Morales, did you break it?" Not a question. A verdict. Arguing burns oxygen. Oxygen keeps brains fed. I kept mine. I tilted my head, hunting through the ripped cloud cover for a single friendly light. A gap opened like a held breath. Polaris winked back. I mapped the sky against the contour lines I'd memorized, set a bearing in my head, and pointed. "That way." The big guy from Texas snorted. "You want to navigate by a star? I am navigating by a star." My voice didn't rise. Command doesn't need volume to be obeyed. We staggered through the pines. Mud sucked at our boots with the greedy patience of something that wanted to keep us. We found the first checkpoint, then the second. By the time dawn peeled the night off the tree line, we were back at the rally point, early and ugly, steaming in the cold. "Radio out?" the instructor asked like he already knew. "Yes, sir." "Who got you home?" Silence stretched, a new kind of silence, not the kind that erases you, but the kind that acknowledges without applauding. No one named me, and I didn't need them to. A couple of heads glanced over, then away, like they'd glimpsed a truth they weren't ready to carry in public. Not admiration. Something better, grudging respect. Respect stays. That night in the barracks, I lay on the narrow mattress and listened to the building breathe. Pipes ticked. Boots thumped. Far off, someone laughed, the kind of laugh that only happens when you've survived something together. My hands remembered the feel of damp paper from years ago. My chest remembered the burn that comes when you're alone at a table full of people. The fortress held, I slept. OTS reshaped me in small, permanent ways. I learned the economy of force: save your words for when they move the field. I learned that courage is not loud, it's decision under pressure. I learned that some men will hate you for being good, not because you failed, but because your competence shrinks their mythology. They will look for cracks. They will throw syrup. They will call it a spill. The day I pinned bars on my collar, I stood in front of a mirror and did the smallest, bravest thing I know how to do. I believed myself. The room didn't cheer. There was no parade. My mother texted a thumbs-up emoji. My aunt posted Noah's deadlift PR. I saved my breath for the work. Work meant Mac Dill. Secure rooms. Screens that hummed with more truth than any living room argument. War games where the loudest person in the tent is rarely the most dangerous. I built teams that could sift noise from signal, while the world insisted on hearing only the shouting. And then there was Ethan, who never raised his voice to be heard and somehow was. The first time he looked at a map over my shoulder and pointed to the exact grid I was tracing, I felt the strange relief of being seen without being framed. Not hero, not problem. Just a mind answered by a mind. If you've never been chosen last in your own family, you might not understand how intoxicating simple recognition can be. It's not the big speeches. It's the coffee placed in your hand exactly how you take it. It's one sentence. "You're right, keep going." It's the promise that if the sky closes up and Polaris disappears, someone else will still help you find north. I wish this were the part where the past lets go. It doesn't. Family myths don't dissolve, they harden. In El Paso, my aunt started telling a new story. That I'd gotten soft in cyber, screens instead of sweat, chairs instead of chaos. Noah told it louder. He told it at barbecues. He told it in group chats. And when he realized the lie needed teeth, he sharpened it on me. A week before the engagement party, my mother called with a sweetness she reserves for favors she's already decided I owe. We're all so proud of you, Mija. Your cousin's doing something special too. Maybe you could help him with a small situation. Money. It's always money when love is conditional. I said I'd call back. I didn't. In the space between hanging up and not calling, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a roof onto a ledge only I could see. No more payments for the privilege of belonging. That no changed the air. You can feel resentment move like heat from a door you didn't realize was a furnace room. The group chat quieted. Then Noah's posts got louder. Jokes at my expense with the teeth just visible enough to draw blood. Ethan read them and breathed slow, the way he does when he's counting to 5 instead of breaking someone's jaw. Data keeps receipts, I said. Stories rot when you shine light. Then we'll keep the lights on, he replied. The engagement party arrived bright and sea-salted. I wore pale blue because white felt like an invitation to be stained. The garden filled, phones lifted, the quartet tuned. I kissed my mother's cheek and tasted distance. My aunt hugged me like a victorious opponent. When Noah took the mic, I knew. The way you know an engine is wrong by the feel, not the sound. He smiled his surgical smile and tried to carve my life into a better shape for himself. He forgot about the one thing that had kept me alive in rooms like this since El Paso. I don't need you to believe me to make it true. What came next looked like chaos to the untrained eye. It wasn't. It was staging. Freeze the scene, log the time, identify the cameras, then let the right sentence land. In El Paso, syrup drowned my letter. In Tampa, sunlight drenched the truth. You compromised classified systems, Ethan said. Noah's expression didn't fall. It calcified. My aunt's hand trembled. My mother whispered my name like a warning, not a comfort. I stood still enough to conduct electricity. You don't win these battles with volume, you win them with sequence. Evidence, process, consequence. And for the first time since that sticky red tide crept across my future, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel at a family table: leverage. The engagement party should have been over the moment Noah's voice poisoned the air, but my family had never been experts at letting things end clean. They like to stretch humiliation into an art form, even if it meant doing it in front of 300 people and a live stream audience scattered across time zones. I kept my posture upright, my breathing steady. Years of cyber training had wired me to treat silence like raw data, not empty, but waiting to be analyzed. The crowd was silent, but in that silence I heard everything. The sharp inhale when Noah said I was a fraud, the small gasp when Ethan dropped his 4 words. Every sound was a data point. Every expression was a log entry. When I turned back toward the rows of guests, I saw the faces I had cataloged earlier. A colonel from MacDill whose eyes narrowed like he just watched a classified file slip through the wrong hands. A fellow captain who bit her lip, already calculating how this would ripple through the command grapevine by morning. My mother, lips pressed so tight they blanched white, staring at Noah as if his disgrace could still be saved with enough denial. Noah still thought this was a family drama. He didn't realize he had stepped into a courtroom built on bandwidth and timestamps. The first log. The night before the party, I had noticed unusual activity in my secure cloud folder. A duplicate login from an IP address that didn't belong, traced back to a device registered under Noah's name. He wasn't supposed to even know about those systems, but he had always loved showing off that special forces means smarter than the rest attitude. He wanted leverage. He wanted dirt. What he didn't understand was that cyber doesn't forgive curiosity. It remembers. Every keystroke leaves a fingerprint. Every unauthorized access becomes a breadcrumb that leads right back to the thief. So when he shouted his accusation about me stealing credit, I didn't hear humiliation. I heard confirmation. The liar had just placed himself on record. The wargame tent. Weeks earlier at MacDill, I'd sat in the joint operations tent during a massive wargame exercise. Picture chaos. 50 officers shouting into radios, maps strewn across tables, the screens flickering with feeds that contradicted each other. To an outsider, it looked like leadership. To me, it looked like noise. I tuned it out. Pulled one thread of data, cross-referenced a satellite image, and saw what no one else wanted to admit. The enemy wasn't retreating, they were baiting us into an electronic kill box. Captain Morales, your input? One of the majors barked, half mocking, half dismissing. Before I could answer, Ethan leaned over my shoulder, eyes on the same grid coordinate I had been circling. "They're baiting us," he said quietly, not to me, to them. His voice carried enough authority that the room went still. I nodded once. "Confirm enemy main force concealed here," I said, tapping the exact ridge line. The war game shifted in real time. Orders changed. Units redeployed. And the disaster everyone thought was inevitable evaporated. That night I downloaded the raw system logs and tucked them away, not because I doubted my work, but because I knew how people like Noah rewrite stories. If you don't hold the evidence, the narrative becomes whatever the loudest person in the room wants it to be. Back in Tampa. So when Ethan's voice cut the garden with "you compromised classified systems," I let the words hang, then lifted my phone. One touch, that's all. The packet I had prepared, the login data, the timestamp, the unauthorized access report, was uploaded to a secure channel linked to the Inspector General's office. Noah blinked. He didn't know yet, but the battlefield had just shifted under his boots. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to explain myself to an audience that had already written me off. The truth was moving now, crawling across encrypted lines, impossible to stop. The look that told me everything. Across the aisle, my aunt's face drained of color. She knew. Mothers always know when their chosen son has overplayed his hand. My own mother refused to meet my eyes. That hurt worse than Noah's smirk or his lies. She looked at me like I was the embarrassment, the one ruining a perfectly staged afternoon. But then I caught the gaze of a young lieutenant from my unit. She didn't look away. She mouthed a single word, "respect." And that was enough. Cliffhanger. The guests didn't realize it yet, but a storm was already building. What had started as a family ambush was about to become a federal investigation. The live stream was still running, capturing every frame, every slip, every damning second. Noah thought he had silenced me. Instead, he had given me the one thing I had been denied since El Paso: a platform where the data, not the family, would have the final word. And data never lies. Barbecue smoke curls the same way no matter where you are: Texas, Carolina, Florida. It promises comfort, normalcy, family. But in St. Petersburg, on the manicured lawn behind my cousin Noah's rented duplex, the smoke clung to me like camouflage over a battlefield. The grill hissed, cheap Budweiser cans clinked, and the whole backyard was set like a stage. Paper plates, folding chairs, men laughing louder than they needed to. My father leaned against the fence, chest puffed with borrowed pride as Noah bragged about another training exercise, punctuating each story with exaggerated hand motions. My mother laughed in all the right places, never at the wrong ones. And me, I was supposed to sit, smile, nod, just like always. But that afternoon wasn't about celebration, it was about extraction. The setup: I had just been promoted, captain's bars pinned on crisp blues. The kind of achievement you sweat for, bleed for. But here in the backyard, those bars were currency. My aunt with her perfectly polished nails had been circling all day, offering me iced tea, brushing imaginary lint from my shoulder, each gesture rehearsed. Finally, when the burgers were done and the paper plates were stacked, she struck. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice dipped in honey. "You know your cousin's been doing so well, but trucks these days, my goodness, those payments, we were thinking." I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew the script. My paychecks weren't seen as my own, they were family property. My success wasn't mine, it was leverage for Noah's convenience. "You could help him out a little just until the next bonus," she finished, eyes darting toward my mother for backup. My mother nodded too quickly. Family helps family. The trigger. The words ignited something that had been smoldering since I was 17, watching cranberry juice drown my scholarship letter. Back then, I had been too stunned to speak. Back then, silence had been my only defense. Not anymore. I set my fork down with deliberate precision, the way you set a weapon on a table so no one mistakes your intent. I looked at both of them, then at Noah, beer in one hand, smirk already forming like he knew the answer. And I said the smallest, sharpest word I had: "No." The lawn went still. Even the smoke seemed to pause. The fallout. My aunt blinked like she hadn't heard me right. My mother's lips parted, caught between shock and warning. Noah leaned back in his chair, smile widening. "Come on, Ava, don't be difficult. You know I'd do the same for you." Lie he wouldn't, he never had. "You're a 30-year-old staff sergeant," I said evenly. Your truck is your problem, I am not your bank. The smirk faltered. A ripple passed through the group, tiny but visible. Even his friends, his audience, shifted in their seats. My aunt's eyes narrowed. Don't take that tone with family. And there it was, the word used like a chain, family. The leash they'd yanked every time I tried to run free. The snap. No, I repeated, louder this time, cutting the air clean. I've worn your shame like a uniform since I was a kid. I've paid for peace with silence, with money, with patience. But this, I pointed at Noah, at the smug entitlement carved into his posture, this is over. For the first time, I saw my father's face crack, not with pride, with anger, because I had broken formation, because I wasn't following the unspoken rules of obedience. Noah laughed, short and sharp. You won't report me, you won't tell anyone, you know why? Because nobody in the system ever believes you. There's a code of silence, Ava, and I'm untouchable. The cliffhanger. I looked at Ethan across the yard. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his eyes burned steady. The kind of steady that says, try me. I turned back to Noah, let the quiet stretch until it became unbearable, and said, then let's test that theory. The barbecue was supposed to be a family afternoon. Instead, it became the moment the fortress inside me sprouted battlements on the outside. The moment the leash snapped. The moment they realized I wasn't their daughter, their niece, their fallback account. I was their reckoning. The engagement party should have been winding down, guests sunburned from the Florida heat, string lights just starting to glow. But Noah doesn't believe in endings. He believes in escalation. He waited until the photographer called Ethan and me to the center of the garden. My dress, pale blue against the backdrop of Tampa Bay, fluttered in the sea breeze. Cameras clicked. For a moment, it almost looked like joy. Then his hand closed around my wrist. It wasn't a handshake. It wasn't a cousinly squeeze. It was a grip, sharp and bruising, meant to remind me who the family had chosen long before I could choose myself. The guests froze. Phones lifted higher, lenses drinking in the spectacle. Somewhere the live stream count ticked upward. The assault. Tell them the truth, Noah hissed, breath hot with beer. Tell them you've been stealing credit, or I'll make you. I tried to pull back. His fingers dug deeper. Pain flared up my arm. But it wasn't the pain that mattered, it was the signal. The signal that he wasn't just trying to humiliate me anymore. He was trying to control me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My aunt rushed forward a step, then stopped. My mother half rose, then sat back down. No one crossed the line, no one ever did. The intervention. Ethan moved, not fast, not violent. Just deliberate, each step the same rhythm he used in a cockpit checklist. He placed his body squarely between us, forcing Noah's grip to break. My wrist burned, but the sudden release felt like oxygen flooding back into starving lungs. His voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. In a tone that carried the precision of a radio report, he said 4 words. You obstructed an investigation. The garden split open with silence. The shift, those weren't just words. In the language of the military, they were a detonation. Obstruction wasn't about sibling rivalry or family drama. It was about interfering with official channels, tampering with classified access, crimes that destroyed careers faster than bullets ever could. Noah's face slackened. His smirk, the armor he always wore, cracked. He looked around for rescue, his mother, my father, the friends who always clapped the loudest. None of them moved. Every uniform in the audience knew what those words meant. And then my phone buzzed in my palm. One touch had already sent the packet. Login logs, timestamps, proof of Noah's unauthorized access. Data doesn't tremble, data doesn't lie. It was already streaming toward the Inspector General and the Judge Advocate General's office. The crowd. A champagne glass shattered against the stone patio, nerves too tight to hold stemware steady. A major from MacDill whispered to the colonel beside him, eyes never leaving Noah. The string quartet had stopped mid-bar, bows hovering useless in the humid air. And then the live stream chat exploded. Hashtags blazed, #protect the captain, #code of silence, #morale's truth. Clips replayed in real time, camera angles catching the exact moment Noah's fingers clamped on my wrist. This wasn't a private scene anymore. It was evidence, broadcast and archived before anyone could bury it. The collapse. Noah tried to laugh, but the sound rang hollow. She's lying. This is all? Enough. Ethan cut in, eyes cold as steel. Every person here is a witness. You crossed a line you can't uncross. The words pinned Noah in place like a spotlight pins a fugitive. For the first time, he looked small, just a man who had mistaken brutality for power, now exposed under the unforgiving clarity of law and light. The cliffhanger. I lifted my chin, wrist throbbing, eyes sweeping the crowd. No one moved to save him. No one moved to condemn him, but the silence was no longer suffocating. It was verdict-shaped. Noah's career, his reputation, the myth he had built out of fists and family loyalty, it all began to crumble in the span of 10 seconds. And I stood there, the sting of his grip still hot on my skin, knowing this battle wasn't over. Because men like him don't retreat gracefully. They burn on the way down. Victory doesn't sound like trumpets, it sounds like paperwork. By dusk, the garden had traded champagne for chain of custody forms. Military police stepped through clusters of guests, voices low, movements careful, the way you move around a wound you can't yet see the edges of. The string lights glowed over a scene that looked almost beautiful if you didn't know what beauty had just cost. We didn't cut a cake, we gave statements. I watched the videographer hand over a drive with trembling fingers. The colonel from MacDill confirmed the time code. Ethan had spoken aloud. A junior lieutenant who'd mouthed respect earlier stood straight-backed and said, "I saw the grip." It was forceful, as if choosing those words might choose the future. My mother avoided my eyes with professional precision. My aunt paced like a litigant between hearings. Noah stood off to the side, chin up, pupils blown wide. A man already searching for a version of events he could live inside. Back at our apartment, the silence wasn't heavy or righteous. It was hollow, the kind that rushes into the space where you thought your life would be. I sat on the edge of the bed in the pale blue dress, wrist wrapped in a dish towel full of ice, jaw aching with the memory of fingers. Ethan moved in that domestic, disciplined way of his. Veil pins out, water boiling, Advil counted. Windows cracked to let the Gulf air rinse the day. "I won," I said finally, testing the words like you test a bridge after a storm. "Winning is a ledger," he said, not looking away. "It balances later." The ledger started to balance in ugly columns. Messages arrived before midnight. From numbers I didn't know, traitor. From accounts with eagles in their bios, code of silence exists for a reason. From an address I knew by heart. "My aunt, you have destroyed your own family for likes." I turned my phone face down, then back up again because even steel has nerves. Morning brought the first official ripples. IG acknowledged receipt. JAG flagged the packet. MacDill legal requested preservation of all media related to the incident. By lunch, an email from an Army liaison hit my inbox with the only sentence I wanted and dreaded. SGT. Noah Morales, administrative suspension pending investigation. The air changed temperature. Denial has a smell, it burned off. My mother called and left a 3-minute voicemail that never once used the word hurt. She said embarrassed twice. She said neighbors. She said we could have handled this privately, like privacy had ever done anything but bury me. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened the apartment windows wider and made coffee the way Ethan makes it for me when I forget I'm human. Black, 2 sugars, the way attention can taste when it's love instead of surveillance. He slid the mug into my hand and touched my wrist with surgeon gentle fingers. "He'll come apart before he apologizes," Ethan said. "Then we don't stand under him while he falls," I answered. The viral arc moved like weather, fast, loud, sloppy. Hashtags crested and crashed. Opinion videos sprouted, some using my name like a credential, others like a curse. Commenters decided what kind of woman I must be. The internet built an avatar of me and argued with her. I ignored it as best I could, right up until a subject line stopped the room. From CPLL. First SFGA support. Subject, you cracked something open. Captain Morales, you don't know me, I know you, not personally, by reputation, by survival. For 2 years I've lived 2 lives, the one where I wear the uniform and the one where I make myself small around men who think authority is the same as ownership. Your cousin is a legend in some circles, not for the reasons he posts about. I watched your clip. I watched you not flinch. And I watched a man I'm supposed to defer to grab you like you were inventory. Do you know what I felt? Permission. I filed today, not because I think the system is perfect, but because you made it impossible to pretend I didn't see what I saw. 3 others filed after me. Maybe that matters, it matters to me. Whatever they say about you this week, please know, somewhere a woman you've never met slept with the lights off for the first time in months. Thank you. I read it twice. Then a third time, and the room doubled like heat over asphalt. For the first time since the garden, tears came with no shame attached to them. Not grief tears. Relief, the kind that evacuates a building inside you that's been on fire so long you forgot to leave. Ethan didn't try to fix it. He just let it happen, and that letting was the fix. That afternoon, the investigation took on the shape of a machine. Requests for interviews. A notice that my aunt had retained counsel. A hint through channels that Noah would pivot to misunderstanding and stress. The classic choreography. Frame the harm as an accident, the harm doer as a good man having a bad day, the target as overreacting. I answered every email with exactness and no performance. I kept receipts, I made lists, I slept. On day 3, the Army liaison called to confirm what the inbox had already suggested. Additional complaints had surfaced: harassment, threats, misuse of systems. Not one, multiple. Patterns are louder than incidents. Data is a choir. My phone lit up again. My aunt, this time without punctuation. You are killing your cousin, you are killing your mother's heart, you are killing our name. I put the phone down and walked to the balcony. The bay was flat as code. A pelican skimmed the surface with insultingly casual grace. Behind me, Ethan leaned in the doorway, half in shadow, the way he does when I need silence to decide who I am. I used to think justice would feel like applause, I said. What does it feel like? He asked. A room with the windows open, I said. And a door I don't have to lock. The door would not stay unlocked by wishing. So I did the unglamorous work of protecting the future, changed passwords, filed protective measures, asked legal to request a no-contact order through command. I wrote a statement that did not try to change anyone's mind, only to tell the truth in a way that would still be true a year from now. That night, in the kind of quiet that isn't hollow anymore, I pulled a notebook from the drawer and wrote a different kind of report. Not for IG, for me. It began with a sentence I had never let myself write: I am not the family's ledger, I am my own balance. The next morning, IG scheduled a comprehensive interview. JAG flagged additional potential charges beyond obstruction. The machine was moving, and for once it wasn't grinding me up. It was chewing on the myth that had kept me small. My mother texted a single line: "Can't we talk before this goes too far?" I stared at the words until they blurred. It has already gone as far as it needed to, I thought. It went there the first time syrup ran red over a future with my name on it. I typed no and didn't send it. Some answers don't belong to text. The phone rang, unknown number, military exchange. I answered. The IG's voice was professional, careful, precise. We confirmed time and location, rights and process. At the end, she paused. "Captain Morales," she said, "off the record, thank you for keeping meticulous logs." I learned early, I said. People misremember, data doesn't. When I hung up, Ethan had the go bag on the table, not because we were running, but because preparation is how we keep fear from telling us who we are. He tapped the canvas once. "Whatever comes," he said. "Whatever comes," I echoed. The knock on the door came just after noon, an official courier, envelope stamped and sealed. Inside, notice of expanded scope, additional complainants, and a line that changed the temperature of the room by 10 degrees. Subject: recommendation for immediate removal from duty, SSG Noah Morales pending. The ledger was balancing. My phone buzzed again, my aunt voice sharp enough to cut glass: "You're ending his career." I held the phone away, looked at Ethan, then brought it back to my ear. "No," I said, steady. "He did." I ended the call. Outside, a thunderhead climbed out of the Gulf, dark and tall and full of eventual rain.
The investigation machine never stops once it starts rolling. By the time the hearings wrapped, Noah was already a shadow of the man who swaggered into my engagement party. The golden son, the family's chosen warrior, stripped down to an administrative file, stamped in red: dishonorable discharge, obstruction, assault, misuse of systems. He didn't fall loudly. He fell like a building imploding quiet at first, then everything gone in seconds. My aunt stopped calling. My mother's voicemails dwindled to sighs and static. My father never spoke at all. Silence had always been their weapon. Now it was their retreat. But justice doesn't feel like victory parades. It feels like standing in the wreckage and deciding if you rebuild here or leave. The choice. Ethan and I sat at our small table overlooking Tampa Bay. 2 mugs of coffee between us, 1 binder from Jack, 1 set of promotion papers for me. On paper, we were both on rails to a future mapped by rank. Major, then lieutenant colonel, deployments, staff billets. The treadmill we had already learned to sprint on. I turned the papers over, stared at the blank side. If we stay, this never ends. We'll always be fighting their noise. Ethan leaned back, arms folded, eyes steady. Then, let's fight a different war, one we choose. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just 2 people deciding that survival isn't enough if it costs your soul. The departure. We filed the resignations properly clear, precise, respectful. The Corps and the Navy had given us discipline, resilience, and each other. But they had also carved pieces out of us. We weren't willing to keep paying with marrow. With our savings, we bought a cedar-shingled house on the Maine coast south of Portland. The realtor called it charming. To me, it looked like armor. Weathered grey siding, a stubborn roof, a yard that sloped toward the Atlantic like it had decided long ago not to care about approval. The first night, I stood on the back porch and listened. Not jets screaming, not radios barking, just surf slamming against rock and a lighthouse beam sweeping rhythm across the dark. A new rhythm. Our drills changed. Instead of 500 pints, it was splitting logs before the fog burned off. Instead of war game tents, it was learning how to patch a leaking roof without swearing too loud. Ethan built furniture in the garage, oak tables, walnut shelves, his hands steady in a way combat never let them be. I wrote. At first in journals, then on a laptop, then in chapters. Not intelligence reports, not statements, just my story. One morning, an email arrived from a corporal I had never met. She wrote that she'd served under Noah's command, that she had kept quiet because she thought no one would ever believe her. When I saw you stand there in that garden and refuse to break, it gave me permission. Because of you, I filed. And when I did, 3 others did too. He isn't untouchable anymore. You didn't just save yourself, you saved us. I cried then, the kind of tears that wash, not wound. My pain had not been wasted. It had multiplied into courage for others. The new vows. A year after the ruined engagement party, Ethan and I walked barefoot on the sand below Portland Headlight. No tux, no dress, just sweaters, jeans, and the cold Atlantic curling at our ankles. We read vows written in our own hands about peace, respect, partnership, about being each other's safe harbor. The lighthouse beam swept across us as we kissed, and the gulls screamed like unruly witnesses. It wasn't a grand ballroom. It wasn't live-streamed. It was ours. The ending that matters. That night, back in our house, I lit the wood stove and pulled a single sheet of paper from my drawer. The last letter I'd ever written to my family, unsent. I fed it to the fire and watched the edges curl black, not with anger, with release. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a warrior. I was simply free. Closing words. If you've ever had to cut free from people who claimed to love you but only loved what you could give, know this: your freedom is worth the fight. Your peace is worth the price. And one day, standing on your own shore, you'll feel it, the quiet that doesn't erase you, but finally lets you exist. This was my war, and this is my peace. What happened to me is proof that even in betrayal, you can find freedom. If this touched you, let's stand together. Like this video if you've ever felt unseen. Share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to join a community built on truth and courage. Leave a comment. I see you. So we all know we're not alone.